Hello and welcome back. Today we take a final look at Don Whitney's book, Praying the Bible, and our topic is chapter 10 of this book, When You Don't Know What to Pray. And many of us have found ourselves in that area when we don't know what to pray, or perhaps we could even call this chapter when you're so distracted you can't concentrate on praying. And how do we handle that particular situation? And Whitney has been helping us pray by teaching us to pray the Bible, right? And in this last chapter, he gives several examples. I'll just stick with one. One example of prayer, a great example of prayer, was a man named George Mueller. Now, he ran an orphanage in Bristol more than 100 years ago, and he cared for up to 2,000 orphans at a time. And over his lifetime, he cared for more than 10,000 orphans. And he was, as it were, famously poor. He didn't have a lot to feed, just amass wealth to buy food with. And so he famously depended on answered prayer to feed these children, right? And to feed all these orphans. And it was said that over the course of his lifetime, he had a journal, a book, in which he recorded more than 50,000 specific answers to prayer in his lifetime. And so he was just a great example of prayer. And when you think about a guy like that, and we begin to compare ourselves to a great guy like that, we think, I can't relate to this guy. This guy is just a prayer warrior, and I'm not that. And so we can become discouraged, and especially when we start talking about his prayer practice. He got up early in the morning. This is what a lot of times happens with those who pray a lot. They get up early and they pray for quite a long time, even before breakfast. And that was his practice. It was George Mueller's practice. And what sort of humanizes George Mueller for us is that he did probably what some of us would do if we got up early in the morning. Sometimes he was a little drowsy. He just sort of admits, for a little while there, I just sort of wake up and I got up to pray, and, my mind would wander here or wander there, and it would take me, he says, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. But as I struggled through, eventually, after 20 or 30 minutes of this, I would eventually get my mind right on the Lord and right on prayer, and I would begin to pray, and it was a good time. And he sort of struggled in this way for, I believe, for a number of years. Well, he says in sharing this story, he shares that there was, in fact, a secret that kind of helped him get through. He changed what he was doing. He still got up early in the morning, but as he got up early in the morning, instead of just immediately going to prayer, what he first did was he would read the Bible a bit, right? And as he read the Bible, he would reflect perhaps on the greatness of God or on something that God would want him to do or to be. And as he saw the greatness of God, and as he saw what God wanted for him, or how God wanted him to think about things, he would pray those things. He would either pray a praise to God for his greatness, or God, help me to do this, or help me to stop that. And he used the Bible to help him pray well. And so as he did that, he found that he didn't struggle anymore. He didn't have to struggle for 10 or 20 minutes to get his mind on what he should pray about. He just read the Bible and then prayed those scriptures, and that helped him greatly. And so this is just a way for Whitney to sort of reinforce what we've been talking about in this book, right? If we let the Bible lead us, it'll help us in all kinds of ways, including sometimes we just have trouble concentrating our attention on prayer. And by having specific prayer requests, by praying the Bible, we don't have to struggle about what to pray about. We can immediately walk into, here are the things that matter to God, and here are the things we will pray about. Well, let me close this video with a series of just maybe 3 books I want to cover that have been really helpful to me in praying. So if you want to keep studying prayer and keep thinking about prayer, and you liked this book by Don Whitney and you want to go sort of deeper, let me just talk about 3 books that have been really helpful to me. The first is A Call to Spiritual Reformation by D.A. Carson. I think this book is now under a different title. Praying with Paul, I believe, is the title of the book. But it is a great book that focuses on the prayers of Paul and the way the Apostle Paul prayed for the various churches that he wrote to. Of course, we know that Paul wrote many of these New Testament epistles, and in many of them, he actually writes out in the very book itself, this is what I'm praying for you all. Right? So in Ephesians 3:16, he says, I'm praying that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being. And so we could say, well, that's a great prayer. Maybe I'll pray, God, by your great power, strengthen my sister in Christ, Susie, strengthen my brother Joe, that they might be strengthened by your power, by your Spirit, strengthen them so that they will have strong faith in you. And so we recognize that Paul is praying for specific spiritual matters and asking God to do that in the life of his people. And so this is a great book that sort of goes over those prayers and talks about them and helps you think about sort of thoughtfully praying the prayers of Paul. Pray those for those that you know. Another book that was really helpful to me early on is A Method for Prayer by Matthew Henry. And this book, I think it was brought to my attention just before I first became a pastor. I first became a pastor in 2006. And just a few months before that, I think somebody pointed this book out to me. And this book has, in the early sections, has sort of like categories and then Bible verses under each category. If you want to pray for a hunger for God, pray these verses. If you want to pray for your holiness, pray these verses. If you want to pray, and so it's just it's arranged sort of thematically in those early chapters, and it really helped me. Well, it helped me think about praying for various subjects like this, and I used it, honestly, to organize our Wednesday night prayer meeting for the 7 years that I was at that church. We just I kept going back to this book, finding new verses that we could pray, and we would pray on certain matters, certain weeks, and the next week we'd come back to other matters, and the next week other matters. And this was a really helpful guide to me, and just like a real companion to me for those first few years of pastoral ministry. Another book recommended probably at the same time as this one was this book here, A Guide to Prayer by Isaac Watts. It has other some good writings on just focusing on different aspects of prayers. It actually helped especially just reinforce that I needed to be asking myself and asking myself the things that matter, what things matter to God, and praying those things into my life instead of just praying things that mattered to me that perhaps didn't matter to God so much. And so I just think these are three great books that I can recommend to you to go deeper if you want to spend more time thinking about how to pray well and how to even perhaps pray the Bible. And then just when I was thinking about all of these books and I was about to be done, I thought, I was reminded that I've been actually quite helped over the course of my sort of spiritual growth by Don Whitney, actually. When I was in Bible college in the mid-90s, Don Whitney came to my church and he spoke on spiritual disciplines. He had written this book and he even met a few of us at a restaurant early morning. I think early on a Monday morning. He spoke on a Sunday. We met him at this restaurant on a Monday morning, and it was just a time where it was a big impact on my life, and I didn't really have, I was doing some reading and so on, but it helped me be more disciplined in making sure that I'm reading the Bible and making sure that I'm praying, and maybe perhaps I should even consider fasting, and many of the other disciplines that are covered in this book. I think that just having this man come to our church and talk about them and encourage us to pray and all of these other disciplines was very helpful to me. It impacted me. I remember even the opening verse here at the beginning of the book is 1 Timothy 4:7, discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. And I took that and I printed it out and I hung it up on my study wall when I was in seminary. And so I had forgotten, I guess, a bit how much I had been impacted by Don Whitney. And so I just thought to mention that at the end. We just did a whole video on how Don Whitney can help us to pray. And I'm just, thankful to the Lord for the way that the Lord has used him in other areas of my life previous to this time. Well, perhaps then we're ending this video with a bit of a thanks to Don Whitney, but also a reminder of how God uses other people to push us toward godly practices that honestly have helped Christians walk in the joy of the Lord in times past, right? And so sometimes if somebody writes a book and says, Christians used to do this a lot, and we should do that, right? And may we walk then in those same practices so that we can have and we can enjoy fellowship with the same Lord. My prayer is that the Lord will use Whitney's book to set in you a pattern, a lifelong pattern of praying the Bible, and perhaps in 20 years, you'll remember that this book, the Lord used this book to be instrumental in changing your prayer life for the better. Of course, the payoff is not that we can thank any one person other than the Lord. The payoff will not be better prayers, but a heart more like Jesus' heart, who loves the Lord and delights in fellowship with the Lord and delights that you can fellowship with the Lord in prayer, and that we become men and women who pray.